Well, this morning we're focusing on the Auditor General's report on municipalities. Listen to this. Only 41 municipalities in the entire country receiving clean audits. Now, that's out of 230 municipalities and 18 municipal entities. So what exactly is going on? South African Local Government Association's Chief Officer on Municipal Finance, Kgomotso Letsatsi, joining us this morning. Kgomotso, good morning to you. And this is shocking. This simply isn't good enough. How did we get here?
Good morning, Gareth. I think as SALGA, firstly, we must welcome the AG report and, of course, express concern and disappointment in terms of the state of accountability, basically, in local government. And basically what we've seen, Gareth, over the years is that year on year, there were 27 municipalities that had clean audit. And 14 entered the category for the first time in terms of clean audit, and those must basically be applauded. And over and above that, in the unqualified audit category, we're looking at around 141 municipalities, basically leaving us with 170 municipalities that either got qualified audit disclaimers, adverse outcomes, and of course those municipalities, I think about 9 that are basically still outstanding in the 117. But what we really need to state basically as SALGA that although the 141 accounts for over 73% of local government budgets, would basically take us to 387 billion out of the 508 billion. The view of the SALGA leadership is that 1 rand not accounted for is basically 1 rand too much. And how did we get here? And what we've done as SALGA is that we have gone and basically analyzed about 81 municipalities that have consistently gotten clean audits or either unqualified audits, and basically assessed what their performance has been, and in respect to service delivery, of course, take away the issue around the funding in terms of municipalities. It's a discussion for another day. And we've seen that there's definitely a correlation between the performance in terms of conditional grants, which basically would then translate into service delivery and governance, respectively, in those municipalities. And some of the issues really that we've seen is issues around instabilities in key position in those municipalities, vacancies. The AG has basically highlighted that, and lack of oversight and ineffective oversight committees like your MPECs and your audit committees. So
because in the end, this comes down to a service delivery issue, doesn't it, Kgomotso? I mean, it's in the end, we can unpack numbers and, what the issues are. But the point is, if these municipalities aren't handling their money properly, it means people aren't getting services. We're talking basic services. Let me just cite Natasha Mirian from Business Live. She states in her article that the AG has said, in her view of the AG, the situation in 28% of the country's municipalities is so dire, and I quote, there is a significant doubt they'll be able to continue operating. Some municipalities might never be able to operate properly again.
No, true that. So there's quite a number of municipalities that have basically been flagged for going concern. And hence, on our end, we're calling for a complete rethinking in terms of the current situation that as we see it around the interventions. I think the legislation definitely provides for support both from national and provincial governments, and as well as various stakeholders basically by the AG. And we really need to go and undertake a dipstick approach in terms of assessing these municipalities. Because if we really have to be honest, other than the governance issues, just on the financial health, because audit outcomes is something else, and financial health and service, in the main, their customer base is generally indigent. And that municipality would basically qualify as such, meaning that they don't have a pool in terms of property rates and taxes, and basically they rely on national transfers. And that's not necessarily always driven by the demand in terms of the resources in those municipalities in delivering those services.
Kgomotso, help me understand. What do you tell municipalities and residents of municipalities who now have no choice, they say, but to protest because of a lack of service deliveries? We saw this yesterday in KZN. We've seen this in Soweto. What do you tell residents when municipalities are failing like this financially and they're left with no option but to protest in the streets? What do you tell the communities that are doing that?
No, definitely they've got the constitutional rights, and their rights are basically protected in the Constitution. If you look at basically the 5 objectives basically of local government in delivering services, and there's no way that we have to deliver those services. But however, the entire ecosystem must basically be functional, and that goes for accounting for the resources that are basically allocated to the municipalities and monies that are basically collected to the residents, and making sure that we sufficiently fund those municipalities in delivering those services. Those municipalities spend on conditional grants that are basically allocated to them in delivering those services. And in terms of just the entire ecosystem around service delivery is not always a straightforward one. If we take Soweto for argument's sake, you would be aware that it's actually ESCOM that's actually providing electricity in Soweto. And it's got its own implications in terms of the ability of City of Johannesburg to basically collect its rates and taxes in those municipalities, because those municipalities, they rely on electricity as a credit control measure. So there's those structural dynamics, and that's why it's important that we don't simplify the issues, but the issue around governance and making sure that municipalities have got capacity to basically issue credible financial statements.
I suppose the problem in the end, Kgomotso, before I say goodbye to you, you started the interview by saying that this has been ongoing for a number of years. If this was a commercial entity and you were involved as the chief officer of finance in this, you would be asked to fire people for not reaching their targets. Who would you be firing, Kgomotso Letsatsi, from these municipalities? Very quickly.
So in this instance, the buck stopped with the accounting officer, then that becomes the MM, who would have delegated responsibilities to the CFO. And basically that's where the buck stops in terms of around financial management. And council has got a responsibility to set the correct leadership tone in making sure that those officials that have to be held accountable are basically held accountable, and they extract accountability and consequence management, and the legislation definitely provides for that.
Only with 41 municipalities receiving clean audits out of 230. It's a dire state of our country at the moment, but I appreciate your time, Kgomotso Letsatsi. It's very complicated as she explains what the issues are, but at some point we need to stop making excuses. We cover this every single year, and it seems like not much is changing. Salga, Chief Officer, excuse me, on municipal finance.